We have one item on the agenda tonight, the highly anticipated transmittal of the budget. Mr. Feuerborn for 2017, 2018. Take it away.
Thank you, Your Honor. Feel very free to jump in. Interactive presentation. I would encourage the council to perhaps follow in one of two ways. I'll be going through the detailed pages of my actual transmittal letter. If you want, you can be advancing through, of course, the summary on page 35 of the general fund will be the majority of what we talk about when we're speaking of the operating funds, but of course it's up to you with whatever is best for you all as far as following along, and stop me whenever you need to. Tonight is technically the actual transmittal of the budget, so this begins the council's time with it. If you've done any advanced reading on it, I would beg that you let tonight just kind of flow over you, and after this you have 1/6 of a year to make your comments or suggestions or whatever you want as far as feedback from city staff is concerning this budget. I'm going to start tonight. Usually I end by thanking staff and the management team for their help on this budget. I want to start with it tonight just to make sure that if we go a little long, I don't forget that portion. Obviously, the budget could not be done without the people who are sitting around us here. Tremendous amount of input, lots of discussion, lots of hours go into the department head's portion of this. Ms. Watson's portion of this is extreme, many 13-hour days. Mr. Icky in putting it together, the core team in advising me on areas that they would like to see beefed up or where they see critical elements. And then of course, when we get to the capital fund, the entire CIP committee is involved with that particular operation, and they have actually determined that it is so critical that they are going to begin meeting year-round at this point. So with all of that being said, Mr. Mayor and members of the council, the proposed operating budget for the fiscal year 2017-2018 is hereby submitted for your consideration. The budget for this particular fiscal year is a result of a lot of detailed work, as I've just stated, on the part of all of staff, trying very hard to meet what we believe are the needs of Raymore, the needs of our citizens, the desires of the council in meeting those needs. The budget has been prepared using a modified zero-based approach, accounting approach, as well as a target-based budgeting approach. What does that mean? Each year, each of the department heads is required to, in effect, start over. They can't use they can look at their last year from a historical perspective, but they have to think about the services that they need to provide in 2018, or they are projecting to need to provide in 2018, and look at those independent of what has occurred in a past year or a program that they have started in the last year. They need to look at those as a single year item relative to what they are going to be asking for within the budget. They should let the historical perspective of cost influence them, of course, but I found over the years that if they get too wrapped up into that, you get into that habit of simply not thinking out of the box about the services that you are supposed to be providing and simply adding a percentage on to your previous year's budget. So we take them all back to zero, and then again, the targeted based budgeting approach. Economic condition and outlook. We use a very conservative method of budgeting, especially in light of the sales taxes that are associated, which is a significant portion of our budget. We assume absolutely no revenues that are not there. If there is, if an example of that, if we know a building is going in, the building has their sign on the side of the building is not open yet, we do not budget for those revenues in that particular year. We do not modify the budget in the middle of the year when a particular business comes on. So on the one hand, we assume no revenues. On the other hand, we assume all possible expenses. Example of that, we have had 3 very good years that have contributed, in fact, to an increased budget balance over the budget for 2017 because we haven't had to spend $90,000 on salt. That does not necessarily mean that we should be looking at dropping the salt number just because we've had 3 good years of not having to spend that kind of money. So we're very, very careful when we look at the expenses to also conservatively budget those high. Economic outlook. We have, and you'll see it later in the budget, the inflation rate that was being used, that I used for this particular budget was 1.5%. The state auditor, as you'll remember from the presentation last week on the assessed valuation, used 2.1%. We do not know where that came from. I use the exact same inflation rate each year. It is the Rocky Mountains Plains State inflation rate for the period May to May when we began the serious business of building the budget, when we're actually putting everything together. If that were to go up, go down in the next year, we're using May to May next year, so it works itself out and evens itself out from year to year. Any questions on the economic outlook or the initial? You may notice we've done something a little bit different this year. They asked me to do a kind of a welcoming budget page before I get into the detail. It's always been one at first, so my presentation's a little bit thrown off because of it. But any questions on anything so far? Great. Okay, into the detail, which begins on page 25, and we'll be beginning with the general fund, which is the summary page for that is on page 35. Before we can look at the 2018 fiscal year, we have to make a determination on how we're going to begin that year. How we're going to begin the fiscal year 2018 is how we are projecting we are going to end the current year that we're in, fiscal year 2017. To do that, we have to go back and make corrections for the assumptions we made at this time last year for how 2016 was going to end in the general fund. We anticipated last year at this time that the general fund was going to end with a deficit amount, expenses over revenues, of $759,301. It actually ended with a deficit amount of $378,208, meaning we didn't spend $381,093 of that amount that we had projected was going to be a deficit. So instead of the budget ending at the projected, what had been projected, we actually ended that budget and began this year at $3,159,111. On page 35, the difference in that, you see at the top of the page, the council adopted beginning budget, just like you'll have one from this budget, was $2,778,018. We actually began with $3,159,111. So we began the year over almost $400,000 higher than we thought we were going to the current year that we're in. In 2017, we are currently projecting revenues to come in $40,890 higher than we budgeted, And we are expecting expenditures to come in $382,759 below what we budgeted. A couple of highlights within there. Franchise taxes. Franchise taxes continue to erode on us. They erode primarily in two areas of note. First one is people continue to not put landlines into their homes, so we continue to see a drop in revenue there. Second one is the wireless carriers, and this has not been challenged yet. I would anticipate sometime in the next couple of years, talking with other city managers, the possibility that it could be challenged. The data portion of your cell phone bill is not considered using your phone, only using your phone. You may remember several years ago, all of the wireless carriers said, we're not going to give you any franchise money because we do not believe that your cell phone is a phone. So they stopped doing that. Got fought in the courts of Missouri, and all of them ended up being told, no, you have to pay over the franchise tax payments. For several years, we saw a windfall in this area. That is leveled off, and the cell phone carriers have begun this new process where they deducted the data usage off of the phone bills. So even though it is a growing area for the city, obviously, as people get rid of the landline, continue to rely on their wireless, it is leveled off as far as what we are receiving as more of the carriers get savvy about dropping that data portion. The other item I'd like to talk about relative to the revenues in the current year is fees and permits. We anticipate fees and permits to come in 72.5% higher than I budgeted for them. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. Again, conservatively budgeting revenues for the last 4 years has it's one thing to conservatively budget the revenue. It's one thing to put your head in the sand and not realize a revenue that is going to be consistent. That is just as not conservative as overestimating. So in this particular year coming up for fiscal year 2018, I have let staff talk me into raising up our estimated fees and permits from residential housing starts, and we'll get to that here in just a few minutes. Total expenditures then are projected to be down 382. Pretty simple. We had a mild winter, and we've had a lot of personnel either turnover or not hired in at the time. Right now we have 3 police officer positions. We have the office assistant position. We have the 1 position in IT. We have 2 positions in parks. All of those add up over the year because obviously salary is we are a service organization, and that is our #1 expense in any given year. So expenses are down, revenues are up, and we started with a higher fund balance. All of those put together result in fiscal year 2017 having an ending balance projected that is $804,739 higher than we had budgeted for, which will have a significant impact, obviously, on how we are projecting to begin fiscal year 2018. I would note, if you're adding things up, at the preliminary budget, you may remember this presentation from last year. At the preliminary budget stage, there's a triple process to getting these numbers in here. Our raw data comes from Encode, our financial package, software package. That gets plugged into the detail sheets of each of the departments, and that includes both revenues are considered a department unto themselves. And then from those detail sheets, it gets rolled over into the summary sheets, and I, at different points in time as I am writing my transmittal letter, will be drawing from one or the other. And then we always have that crazy little thing where expenses The expense holdback that we have to do if expenses change also goes down or goes up according to expenses for the 20% reserve amount. In any event, in this year, that has led to a discrepancy that bothers me between what you're seeing reported here in the summary sheet of $6. Most of that is rounding. At any point in time that you see the $6, use the lower number. Assume you do not have the $6 to spend at the end of the year, please. The 2017 compared to 2018 revenues and primarily 2018 revenues projections. Staff is currently projecting that the total, or budgeting for council consideration, total fiscal year 2018 revenues to come in $204,822 to 2.15% higher than 2017. And $163,932, 1.71% higher than 2017 projected receipts. Obviously, conservative budgeting. We are budgeting less than a 2% increase in total revenues for next year. The highlights relative to those revenues for your consideration. We're anticipating property tax receipts to come in $76,377 higher than they did, than we're projecting in 2017. That amount, as we discussed with the council last year, could be higher, but it is capped by the 2.1% inflationary rate that sets in Hancock, which does require us to roll those back. Franchise taxes, we are projecting them to come in $36,409 higher. Again, as we had discussed, we continue to see erosion in that area, but we are projecting 175 new residents with that. Sales taxes, we are anticipating that the sales taxes will come in 2% higher overall than in 2017. The adopted budget amount, than the adopted budget amount for 2017, $26,005.78 higher than the 2017 projected amount. Obviously, that's not a lot. But sales tax and sales tax growth is going to be an issue. You see it in Ms. Watson's report each month. The pure city sales tax, because there are several different categories associated with this, but the pure city sales tax is something that we want to watch very, very closely. The vehicle sales tax, we're anticipating coming in at 2%, which is slightly higher than what we're projecting for the city sales tax. There are two categories associated with the state vehicle sales tax. One of those categories, vehicle sales tax is distributed to us in accordance with, of the three categories associated with that category, one of the three is associated with our population related to the overall state population. And so anytime there's a census increase, we get a goodly amount of increase in revenue in that, and we're still realizing from the increase in 2010 a good payment from that particular source. Anticipate the exact same thing happening 2 years after this fiscal budget as well. Fees and permits, I have, as I said, been talked into a higher amount. This budget throughout includes budgeting in the various areas that would be associated: franchise taxes, fees and permits, 175 new home starts to the area. Municipal court. We are definitely seeing the effects of Senate Bill 5 and the Supreme Court actions on municipal court, down 14.5%, $63,000. The only, we are anticipating or budgeting for a slight increase over what we're actually going to see with the downturn. The downturn has, from a revenue standpoint, probably reached its zenith in this year. We're seeing all of that. So increase in the docket, increase in the number of tickets, as those start to come on, we will be seeing, we're budgeting for a slight increase in the area over what we're projecting. Obviously not budget. We're still, I believe, about 56,000 from what we budgeted in 2017 to what we're budgeting in 18 to account for that. And of course, the flip side of that is we have costs associated with court that we have not had, and we'll get to those here in just a moment. Transfer from the Stormwater Sales Tax Fund. Each year, the Stormwater Sales Tax Fund essentially transfers money from there into the general fund, primarily to pay for salaries associated with the Stormwater Department in the general fund. Transfer from the enterprise fund. The formula for the transfer from the enterprise fund, complex as it is, can be found on page 207 of the budget behind the enterprise. This year we are budgeting for 810,118. That transfer is to account for direct expenses and administrative overhead that is taken on by the general fund, but directly associated with running the enterprise fund. And the example I give each year of that is the utility clerks, part of Cindy's time, all go to running the enterprise fund and the water and sewer portions for the city. So those are, the general fund gets reimbursed according to the formula on page 207. Capital project administration and inspection and transfer. Mike's department will continue to, and is taking on more of the inspection duties associated with our capital projects. This year, in fiscal year 2018, we anticipate $49,780 to be associated with those inspections. For the council members who've been through this before, you may remember this is a source of revenue that makes me nervous. It is an operating revenue, it is a recurring revenue, but in any given year, we do not, it's a difficult revenue to forecast in that you don't know what capital projects are going to be taken on. We have the obvious ones, street preservation, curb, sidewalk, that they definitely do the administration and inspection for, but after that, you don't know which projects will be coming on and which ones we will be responsible for. That duty will be handed off to an outside firm. So I hesitate every year in over budgeting, and I probably am ultra conservative in budgeting this particular revenue for the city for those reasons. Those are the revenues that are associated with the general fund. Does anybody have any questions yet? Let's push on then. Compensation expenses, compensation, benefits, and staffing always take the lead here. Compensation for this year, I have the budget before you has an improvement to the entire salary chart. And you will remember we went last year, the council approved a step chart for our employees. With the goal obviously being to always be able to improve the chart if at all possible, and definitely step everybody through the chart so that advancement is realized by our employees. This year, we're fortunate enough to be able to recommend to the council that the entire chart be improved by the 1.5% consumer price index increase for May to May, and then after the improvement, step our employees through. And this budget includes both of those assumptions. Health insurance, the budget currently includes a budget of 12% for all of our health insurances to increase. We have received, you all know, this is always an interesting dance with the insurance company. It's like they deliberately try to frustrate me at this time of the year and wait till the last second. We've received what they call the first pass of our insurance increase. It is just under the 12%, but last year we started in a very high range and ended up at a 0. I do not think with our experience rating and our experience mod this year that we're going to see a zero increase in the insurance rates, but I think it will be better than the 12% overall. That is a significant amount of money for us. We will, and it is a significant amount of money for our employees. I always try to remind the health insurance company that when they're dealing with a public entity, we take these benefits extremely serious. They heard that loud and clear this year. Chief, for the first time, joined Sean in being able to negotiate with them and is involved in that process. I think that's a good thing for us. The final quotes, when they are received, will be reported to the council, as well as their impact on the operating fund. We may request that the council keep that amount in, keep this static to what has been presented to you for benefits overall, even if there is a savings, although if it gets to too high a number, please, if it gets to too high a number, we may be asking you to, just from the standpoint of conservative budgeting and having a realistic picture out there, to peel some of that off. But because you never know what's going to happen with personnel, might be a good idea to keep it in since we've got it covered at this point. Loggers, 2018 will be the first year that we actually have the full impact of the improvement that the council approved to the logger system. Last year, there were a couple of months as we were getting it up and running and getting the ordinance passed after November 1st that we were still on Plan 7, but we have fully gone to Plan 6. It is fully budgeted in the 2018 budget for your consideration. And again, that takes the formula for loggers from 1.5% to 2%. And I can tell you that our employees are extremely grateful to the council for approving that every day. Municipal court clerk, as I'd stated earlier, unfortunately, in addition to lowering revenues, the actions of the state legislature and the Supreme Court will increase our municipal court costs because of additional reporting that we have to do. Some areas that have been shared areas with other departments now have to be shrunk back into the municipal court. Real simple but classic example of that is we used to have the part-time administrative assistant in the police department come up and check people in on court night. No can do anymore. Those have to be flowed over to somebody else, so there's a small cost associated with that in overtime. But one of the larger costs is that what had been the half-time municipal court clerk is going to have to go to full-time. And that position is currently vacant as well. One of the things that the budget coming to you 2 months before you need to actually act on it, we will be bringing you in the next couple of weeks a couple of budget amendments in this year. And this will be one of them, which is why this is described as continuing the action of 2017 that you have not taken yet. And the cost in the new year compared to what would have been a half-time municipal court clerk is $31,564. Maintenance worker 1, the city manager is requesting that the council approve an additional worker to serve in the stormwater, streets, water, and sewer departments. This cost is broken out 30% in the departments of the general fund, 70% in the departments of the enterprise fund. Mike's folks are stretched to the limit. They're getting awards, but they're stretched to the limit. That has become an increasing issue with our growth because we have taken on all utility locates. So in some of the areas within here, you may see wording associated with a utility locator, which would be a primary job of this individual. And they used to slow down a little bit during the colder months. They don't do that anymore. Admittedly, we have had a spike. In this year, you're going to see a budget amendment associated with the spike, because before they disappeared, we were having to go out and do a lot of utility locates for Google. So all of those utility locates are done, and there was a spike in this year's budget that we're going to have to account for within that. But this is just the general increase in the utility locates that we need to have somebody out there to do, so that other folks can be free to do the other daily maintenance items that go on. The last item of note relative to compensation is the office assistance position. This again is another one I will be coming to you all and asking for a budget amendment in this year. This is the greeter slash receptionist slash city manager's assistant to be brought in. I'm going to be, with the money that we have saved by not filling it to date, I will be asking that for the remainder of this year, when we hire the person, they be going to a full-time position, and that full-time position be continued into next year. That amount is $35,274. A lot of that is benefits associated with going full-time. Any questions on compensation, benefits? Sir.
Yeah, real quickly, with the insurance, you mentioned the 12%. Are we anticipating keeping everybody's benefits the same, or would that be a reduction of benefits as well, too? I know a lot of times these insurance companies like to decrease benefits year to year.
No, this is at the level that we have right now. There's been no discussion of a change to the plan, no. It also comes to the point where if it gets down to a low enough amount, currently we are roughly on an 80-20 split, employer versus employee. If the amount is de minimis, I recommend to the council that the city pick up the entire tab of the increase and leave the employees alone. And we did that 2 years ago. Departmental notes. From the administration standpoint, these are pretty simple. Administration standpoint, there is a very, very large drop from 2017 to 2018 in administration because we peeled an entire department out of there, the communications department. The Community Development Department has a proposed slight increase, primarily because this is the year of the rotation for aerial photography to come on, as well as some minor personnel issues within that department, some adjustments. Fiscal year 2018 budget for streets is proposed to increase by $21,612. That increase is primarily associated with the streets department portion of the new maintenance worker one being proposed. Finance has an increase from the 2017 budget of $38,290, primarily attributable to the fees we pay for credit cards. Ms. Watson is aggressively pursuing a way to reduce the credit card fees as more and more people come to the window, and we have created more ways for people to pay using credit cards. You'll notice we have new credit card readers out in front of the windows. That has increased the fee that we have to pay for people to have the convenience of using the credit card. So we are looking at all of the different methods that could be used. In fact, having the credit card readers outside the window is one of the methods to make an attempt to reduce those fees when people can swipe their own card. But we still have a number of people who need our assistance with it, who call it in, who use the card in online, that doesn't work and we still have to pay the fee. So to modify to budget is going to require 38,000, or modify to what we're actually seeing is going to require a budget change of 38,290 in that department. I am hoping to be able to come to the city council during 2018 and say this problem no longer exists, while still being able to provide as many methods as possible to our folks to make their payments. The prosecuting attorney's department began with a budget amendment this year by the city council, but next year will be the first full year. Again, this is a change that has been made due to Senate Bill 5 and the Supreme Court actions. The budget for 2018 is $20,140, primarily associated with what we pay Mr. Marshall. The court had, this particular amount had been in the court department's budget prior to this. The fiscal year 2018 department budgets for all of the departments you see in the next paragraph there, including technology, ED, engineering, stormwater, buildings and grounds, court, police and emergency management, are all either flat, below the previous year's budget by a smaller amount, or increase, but the increase, again, is not a material increase with no significant items to associate with it. Expansion items in the general fund that I am recommending on to the city council. Obviously, we've spoken about the municipal court clerk and the maintenance worker 1 and the office assistant. The only other item that I am recommending of the expansion item request to the city council is the ArcGIS online licensing. This one is a necessary expansion item request. We have a lot invested in the GIS system to continue that and to continue to be able to, this is more of a subscription to continue to expand that system for the public to be able to use it and for it to be user-friendly. Strongly recommending to the council that they make this payment. Top of page 29, you see expansion item requests not being recommended to the city council at this time. The NetScout Wi-Fi tester device, network transmission cable tester, inline network troubleshooter tool, Virtue encryption Google email. Those first 4 I am not recommending to the city council because even after explanation, I have absolutely no idea what they are. Drop the mic. Actually, Mr. Mayberry and I had discussions on, and I have these discussions with all the department heads actually, on wants versus needs versus going to need it but not this year, can be put off to next year. These are wants. They would enhance the system, but the budget was very, very tight this year. Obviously, I'm bringing you a budget with very, very little revenue over expenses, and a lot of that associated with that administrative and inspection fee that eats that right away. So to be conservative and painfully, because it's these people that make this budget live and these things that help them, I can't recommend these items to you at this time. I emphasize the at this time. Maybe the insurance could help us. iPad with keyboard. This is an iPad for the HR assistant for when they are traveling. Again, described as a want. It would enhance when the traveling is going on, the ability to work, but not a need. New workstations, 4,200. This is for the city clerk's office. These are probably going to still be here, but when we get to the capital fund section, I'm going to be talking about an item that these would better be paid for from and are actually budgeted into now. The development priming initial phase 1, this comes from our ED department. It will be the next step after we begin getting data back and seeing results back from our retail strategies initiative. Mr. Tapp has put this in for us so that we know it's there. You'll be seeing this in future years. Not recommending it for this year, but we want to start bookmarking this item now because it will be the logical next step in that program. Utility locate vehicle, this goes with the maintenance worker 1. Mr. Crass got very creative, started talking to some of our other department heads, and came up with a way for that person to get around in one of the other big red trucks that are parked in the back parking lot right now. So he withdrew the need for this particular vehicle. Public Works Institute, I'll get to the Public Works Institute. APWA local conference contribution. APWA is going to be having their conference here in town, and quite often when that occurs, different departments will contribute an amount to it so that to help with the conference, to defray conference expenses. I have this one out now. Mike and I, Mr. Crass and I are in discussions relative to where we can take this out of the existing budget and make this payment. The Tyler ITI scanning, once again, probably going to be a need next year, not a need this year. Bookmark that one because you're going to see it again. The 3 that I want to talk about are professional development training for the assistant director and director in finance, and the Public Works Institute for our Public Works folks. If the insurance money, if the amount that we're paying for insurance goes down, if it goes down significantly enough, I would probably be coming back to the council before the October 31st date and asking that these be put back in. Any item that, no matter how small it may seem, any item that contributes to the professional development of our staff, I want to be considering if at all possible. So you may see me coming back to you asking that those be reinserted into the budget. After all of this foregoing, after reserving an amount equal to 20%, which is the council had passed by resolution, that we have to reserve 20% in restricted fund balance. And that amount is $1,927,799 in the projected or in the proposed 2018 budget. It leaves the City Council with an available fund balance of $1,293,443 versus 437. Please don't spend the money. Is projected at the end of fiscal year 2018. This amount is, of course, available for the council to spend as they wish. The council has done an outstanding job of looking at available fund balance in past years and thoughtfully considering the projects that would go into that and making certain that those projects are either not at all ongoing costs, because that will get you in trouble quicker than anything, because in the next year you won't have that and you can end up into a negative available fund balance situation very, very quickly. Or they have proposed projects that only had non-material maintenance amounts associated with them. The normal ongoing maintenance that you would assume from a larger capital project that's in place. So that concludes the presentation of the general fund. Are there any questions that I can answer at this time from council?
Thank you, sir. Looking at the circle chart on page 29, it's more curiosity than anything else, but you see the colored slivers. We show estimated, I'm assuming this is estimated park revenue coming in next year in the fiscal year of 2018. We show parks revenue of 1%, and we are estimating Centerview at 4%. We are estimating that that building we built is going to quadruple the entire amount of revenue from all of our other programs in the Parks Department. Is that a correct assessment?
Within the parks component, yes. Now, most of our program revenue is actually in the recreation department, so you see it within that. And I would point out, I was gonna do this in my initial presentation. I got all hung up. I can't tell you how many eyes go into the budget preparation, and then it mails out, and I take it home like I did last Thursday night, and I open it up, and I should never do that because it's been in your hands. Most of you may not even crack the seal on it yet, and I start to see the grammar errors and the A's that are dropped and the miscolored items, and one of them is this graph. The colors for the 28% and the 33% should actually be reversed, if you've noticed that. So in the final budget draft, those will be reversed out. The 28% should be that greenish blue, and the tan should be over on the 33.
The point of my question was really more for those that remember when we had the presentation from the consultant when we were preparing well in advance of the GO bond, items that were popular and items that provided us the most return on invested capital. And if those that were present for that presentation will remember that rental locations were, at that time, which was a number of years ago, by far and away better than the more popular items such as the indoor swimming pool, which were very popular and bringing a lot of revenue, but would never meet goal. So in addition to hitting a home run with the building itself and citizen liking it, we are already seeing, at least in projected revenue, that ROI coming back to us just within the first year at a pretty good clip. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Rentals continue strong, even in the current year.
With departmental notes, did you leave out communication, or did you talk about that?
Only in the fact that what you see dropped out of the administration is the communications department, and what you see for the budget in the communications department is almost exactly what was dropped out of the administration. They balance themselves out, sir.
All right. Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the first of your presentation, you spoke of that there's positions that are vacant right now, 3 police, 1 office, 1 IT, and 2 parks. Is the budget that you're proposing, is it based on the current level of employees we have, or is it based on the normal standard FTEs that we have?
Standard FTE, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Fully staffed up.
Fully staffed and benefited and all of that. Okay, thank you.
With the hope that overtime goes way down.
Anyone else? What next?
We keep pushing on, sir.
Go pushing.
Park fund. As in any given year, the park board, if the park board submits to me a balanced budget, I simply take that and forward it on to the city council. Mr. Mustine has done all of his background work with them. They have looked at the budget from both a capital and an operational standpoint, and they forward it to you all with their recommendation accordingly. This year that we have had to, when I look at a budget, and I will always guarantee the council that within the general fund and the enterprise fund, this will be so. The beginning fund balance and the ending fund balance are what they are. They drive themselves from what happens in between them. So it has always been my belief that a true balanced budget, and I admit that I am very conservative in this regard, a true balanced budget stands alone within the 12-month period that it is being looked at, in that revenues for the year make all of the expenses for the year. You don't ask for more revenues than the expenses that are associated with the year. So if you're just looking in between the balances, as I described to my staff, then that amount, if it's truly balanced, revenues either exceed your expenses, as they do for the general fund, or that you have an exact zero in there. I am not a city manager who is a big fan of artificially at the last day calling Ms. Watson and going, okay, well, we've got expenses that are $2,000 over the revenues. Go ahead and plug in to whatever revenue that we're going to make 2,000 more. It's a minor amount. It falls as it falls in front of the council, and that's why you tend to see a little bit over and above. The park fund, but state statute says that revenues for any given year can be considered to be the available fund balance at the beginning of the year, plus the revenues that are going to be made that year, minus the expenses. So you get the cushion of that available fund balance in there for expenses. In this case, the park board, the same way that the council adds in items that may take us out of that balance, the park board has requested, and you see it on their summary page, which is on page 155, and I have plugged it in. If you look on this page and you look down into the gray area for projects, you will see an expenditure of $75,000. The park board, the last truly comprehensive master plan for the Parks and Recreation Department was done in 2007, 2008. It is obviously getting to be stale. A number of the items that were proposed in the plan have either been eliminated or have been actively removed. We'll put it that way. So it would be time for a new plan. When we get to that portion, I'd kind of like to talk with the council about a thought that the management team had that was generated as we were going through the budget with the management team last week as a whole. And I would like to, at this point, call out and thank Mr. Carteret for actually kind of dropping a seed on everybody about an idea that he had that I'd like to talk about relative to that $75,000. Details. I always say, and this is starting to get a little bit more out of whack, but when you look at the park fund revenues, in essence, property taxes or the levy, property taxes, program revenues, transfer in from park sales tax, a third, or transfer in from park sales tax and general fund, a third and a third and a third of the parks revenues. It's pretty simple, very consistent every year. What we're really wanting to see with Centerview coming on and with the other amenities coming on is we're going to want to start to see those program revenues begin to creep up as a percentage compared to the other two, so that we start to make up the cost of service within that particular department. The park levy, first pass from the City Council, 12.06 cents, and that will be generating $376,201 in 2018. Again, 28% of total revenue. Program revenues are budgeted in 2018 for a total, and this is across all programs, parks, Centerview, the recreation programs, $495,980. And then the park sales tax fund transfer of $350,000 are the primary points of revenue for parks. Any question on park revenue? Parks and recreation expenditures are budgeted to increase from the 2017 budget by $50,295. This is entirely due to the costs that are associated and being budgeted for Centerview. And the revenues are currently budgeted to cover those. If they keep doing the tours that they're doing and getting the bookings that they do, I think that this may work out very, very well even in its first full year. The expansion items for parks, there are currently no expansion items unless you look at the $75,000. To speak to that, when we were talking about it last week in management team, I was expressing some degree of concern about some of the sub-master plans that they have done in the last several years. They weren't comprehensive, so I was pleased to see them looking big again. The council will have within its memory that the initial pass of the Harkridge Park Master Plan, somebody forgot to tell the consultant how much we needed, that we thought we could possibly bear in the expenses on that. So we had the proposal for the City of Gold to the north. The Trails Master Plan never saw the light of day. When it was initially presented to us, a couple of the department heads had no feedback in it, thought it was important that community development and our city engineer and transportation person would have known that there was a parks plan coming or a trails plan's coming, but they did not. And once they started critiquing it, we realized that plan was no good. So having wasted time and money, I felt, on two sub-plans, I wanted to be sure that Mr. Mustine had a good head around what this was going to be. He does. It's a good proposal. Mr. Carteret then added on to that. As the council knows, we set aside an amount of money in community development each year into the restricted revenue fund for the growth management plan, which is an excellent plan as it currently exists. It is also coming up to the end of its useful life. And we were going to be proposing it for the 2018-2019 budget to begin that review again. The transportation plan and subsections of the transportation plan are obviously about to smack us in the face. The entire huge plan that we're going to be doing for 58 Highway and Dean, but the city as a whole, that transportation plan has used up its useful life. Two of the plans, major plans, the water and sewer plans are still good. They were very comprehensive in their nature relative to infrastructure, but could use the update that's associated with those at this point in time. They're actually our oldest two plans, so should be looked at. And then the stormwater plan is really the only one that has been reviewed recently because we were forced into it from the EPA. All of that being said, there is Mr. Carteret suggested the bold idea that we consider moving to a chaptered comprehensive plan for the city that included all of these other plans. We were talking about at the staff level. I think we can do this. These are experts. I think we would have to call in a consultant for specific targeted pricing or an item, but I think we can do this here. We realize that one of the best plans that we have going for us right now is a growth management plan. We did nearly all of that with staff and with consulting with each other. Several times during the conversation last week, staff brought up areas where the growth management plan conflicts with another plan. This would allow for a cohesive, true comprehensive plan for the city. There was some concern expressed about the strategic plan. And, you know, the strategic plan is here at the top of the pyramid, and the plans flow from that. I challenge the management team to rethink the strategic plan. The strategic plan is a skeleton that the comprehensive plans hang on. It holds them up. It allows them to move. But the comprehensive plan are the body of the work that we do. Management team got pretty excited about it. I actually had to kind of temper them back in that and remind them, we're a little busy right now, have the code thing going on, have a GeoBond thing going on, going to have another GeoBond thing coming on. The timing for it would be such that we would be through the strategic plan vote, we would be through making recommendations relative to the code to the city council, and it would be time for a logical next major initiative on the part of city staff and the city. So while right now that 75,000 is in there, and I would encourage the council to keep it there, A, we may not have to spend that much nearly. B, at a very soon upcoming work session, I'd like to be able to talk a little bit more at length with the council about my thoughts and staff's thoughts on the idea of a true comprehensive plan that was broken down into chapters for each of the departments. That concludes the expenditure portion. That concludes the park fund, actually, if you have any questions relative to anything here. Any questions? Great. Pushing on to the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund that is before you, we will be having a public hearing next month about the actual water and sewer rates that drive this business fund of the city. We will be recommending a decrease in the water rates of 54 cents and an increase in the sewer rates of 54 cents. The overall rate, the blended rate for the city, I hesitate using that term, but the blended rate for the city will remain the same for our customers/citizens in 2018 if the council approves that. We are doing that to more, as we continue to refine the water and sewer rate model, which is extremely complex. As we continue to refine that model, we are better able to, and the council will remember, we are pure cost of service. We try to, we plug in an available fund balance, but over as something that has to be expensed, but over and above that, those rates in each of the divisions, the water division should pay for itself and only pay for itself, same for the sewer, thus the switch. So those are the rates that are being proposed to fund this particular fund. The city's ongoing, as far as expenditures within the water department, we continue to the eternal process of changing out our meters. Last year we changed from all these years and years ago we went with an AMCO meter. It served us well. They are not making it anymore. They are not improving on the new meters. So we have gone back to the census system, back to it. We had partial census system, and their new state-of-the-art meter. The advantage of this meter is it is expandable. We would like to get to the point where somebody calls in and says, is my water running right now? And we can tell them their water is running right now from this office without having to go out. Push one button, we get the reads for the entire city. Really state-of-the-art. Now, that will require not only the meter, getting all the meters in the ground, but then there'll be a year where, with available funds, I would be asking the council for the communication system that's going to be associated with that. This particular budget, again, repeats the $88,200 for the replacement of those meters. We are supplementing that in the enterprise equipment replacement fund with $150,000 to try to get ahead of this program for the next few years and get all of these iPearl meters in the ground in a short amount of time so we can continue to move on and get this program completed. The cost to purchase water from Kansas City is included in the budget. Budgeted amount for the purchase in 2018 is $1,884,000. It is the commodity for the water department. And right now, Kansas City Water Services, as the council knows, is pretty much the only game in town, at least for us, unless we want to go to well water. The only other big game in town is Water One, and Belton did a study a couple of years ago to try to bring Water One at least to their western border, and that price was out of sight. So right now it's, I don't want to call it a monopoly, but it is, at least on this side of the state line. Sewer, cost of treatment for sewer to Little Blue Valley is expected to increase by 6% next year to $1,129,624. Council will remember we actually had, Little Blue has two divisions. They've got Little Blue Valley Sewer that this amount is being paid to, and then they have Middle Big Creek, which serves the eastern part of the city, is the best way to phrase that. Our cost at Middle Big Creek is structured a little bit differently. Little Blue Valley Sewer, we pay for flow, and that flow is, they take a historical for the flow that we have sent to them up in Independence, and that is what they then base our future cost on. So that $1,129,624, 6% increase is based on increasing flows from the city of Raymore. Obviously, as we grow, we have more. As we grow to the east, those costs are by connection points. That amount was the $32.50 that you see on here, and future increases now, it is not budgeted to increase in 2018 from the $32.50. The $684,840 does include a slight increase for homes that would be built going east, which isn't as much as going north with Little Blue Valley and anything that goes down to the Owen Good lift station. So the increase with Middle Big Creek, I believe the next notch up to pay over the $32.50 is in 3 years? Yeah, 2021. And it is, yeah, again, that amount is purely by connection, and it is to pay off the debt service that is associated with providing the system to the Middle Big Creek area. The last cost, which is not listed in here, is for both water and sewer, have $18,991 increase in each one of them. Again, that is for that maintenance worker one. 70% of the maintenance worker one out of this fund, 30% out of the general fund that we just went through. Solid waste is considered part of the enterprise fund because it is a business action of the city. The council is well aware that in January of 2018, the cost for solid waste will be going up to $12.41 per household per month, with slightly increased services for that amount. Transfers out of the enterprise fund, again, on page 207, we outline the 810, 118 that we talked about earlier that goes to the general fund for their support of the general fund, or of the enterprise fund items. And the fund receives the Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund that you'll see a number of projects coming out of for increases or for improvements to existing infrastructure associated with the city. Growth pays for its own in growth and sewer and water connection fees. The Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund is used to maintain the existing system that we have, and there are costs associated with that. In fiscal year 2018, the amount for the transfer into the Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund from the Enterprise Fund is budgeted at $540,099. The two expansion items, again, the maintenance worker one coming out of this budget, and an item that is hydrant meters. Some of you have had an experience with the hydrant meters in the past fiscal year, seeing them out on our fire hydrants in the city. Hydrant meters serve a twofold purpose. Number one, they allow us to see how much water is being used by a developer or a builder that they are taking directly off of the hydrant system. An example of a hydrant meter, when we redid Johnson Drive and yards had to be watered by the contractor and the road had to be cleaned on a regular basis because it got muddy, the developer or the contractor uses a hydrant meter. We have to bill the contractor for the amount of water that they use. That's the important part to me. The important part to Mr. Crass is hydrant meters, as opposed to hooking up a hose to a hydrant, have a backflow preventer on them to keep the system clear. We currently have 5 hydrant meters. 2 of them are fairly new. 3 of them were bought in the 90s and are at the end of their useful service life. This 7,500 calls for the purchase of 3 to replace those that are at the end of their useful service life. It does reach the amount, especially in a business fund, that I do not consider it appropriate to just stick it into an equipment replacement fund, but consider it an expansion item request on the part of Mr. Crass. That concludes the enterprise fund. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Mr. Vuurborn, you mentioned that you would be recommending soon that we keep the water and sewer levy rates basically balanced where they're at, raising one, lowering the other. Yet our cost is going to go up as anticipated by 5% on the cost of water and roughly 6% at least from one division of our wastewater. Will the city just be absorbing that, or how does the math work out on that?
A couple of years ago, when we had to ask for an overall increase in the rates, it was because we were getting dangerously low in available fund balance. And by dangerously low, what I mean is $9,858 at the end of the year. So then when we budgeted to maintain a conservatively low amount that was not absurdly low in available fund balance at the end of the year in the enterprise fund, we had to increase those rates slightly. Obviously, that increase bumped pretty high. Now we're able to level off what we need for the available fund balance as an expense and pay for those other expenses by keeping the rate the same. Does that make sense to everybody?
Thank you. And I think I remember when we had to do that increase, you went out and did a survey of equal cities or cities that were close to us, municipalities, and we got to look at reference points of where their water and sewer rates are. I think that'd be a nice thing to have staff do again, even though this is basically going to be a wash. But I think just to remind our citizens where we are in that pecking order of water and sewer rates. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the really quick typing to my left is taking all of your comments down. I'm not riding, so I can be doing this part, but we're getting all of that. Thank you, Ms. Watson. Debt service fund. Obviously, whenever we take out a bond issue, we have two different funds. One the council does not see, which is called the project fund. That is the money that is raised by selling the bonds. Our trustee bank, First Missouri in Kansas, is Mr. Pete Gardner holds those funds in an account that they are then expended out of or invested for us. And then obviously we have the debt service fund, which is the 7170 levy that is before the council for your approval. The funds raised from that go directly into this fund, are not commingled in any way with any of our other funds, and are used to make the debt service payments associated with the various bond issues. The total, we currently have 5 general obligation bond issues that are outstanding. The total debt of the city as of this writing, last Wednesday to be exact, is $24,390,000. The city has a total debt capacity of $63,044,520. The reason the numbers on the summary sheet for debt service don't match these numbers is because you'll note the 24,000 is less than what you see on the summary sheet in the debt service fund under that particular tab. That is because we are all the time, once a quarter, paying off that debt. So the debt that you actually see on the debt service fund sheet is for the beginning of 2017, and it's slightly over $25 million. I think it's 25,345 or in that range. The total debt capacity for the city, which is figured on our against our assessed valuation. Whatever our assessed valuation is, there is a determination 10% can be applied to what is called general debt, and 10% can be applied to specific debt. General debt means you can take the debt, a general obligation bond out for anything up to the general debt limit. Specific debt, you can only take out a general bond issue up to that limit for water and sewer infrastructure, street maintenance, and right-of-way acquisition. So those are the two categories under which we can do debt. Obviously, whenever you can push your debt to specific debt, you want to do that and keep as much of your general debt open to use for projects that don't fall into one of those specific categories. So right now, we have debt against the 63,044,520 of the 24,390. 40% of that, almost exactly 40% of that, is general debt. 60% of that is specific debt associated with our bond issues. Any questions on debt service? Moving on to the internal services funds. The vehicle and equipment replacement fund is a sinking fund for the city. A long time ago, as we continued to grow, we were beginning to realize significant spikes in any given year relative to the purchase of vehicles. Some departments were on program, some departments were not, but you all of a sudden get a hit for a $110,000 dump truck, and you feel it if you weren't considering it in the previous year. We also want to be very, very conservative in our thinking in that you are going to have that cost, so you need to be thinking about it in this year so you do not, in any given year, so you do not accidentally budget another recurring cost over it and find yourself having to borrow to get this sort of equipment, which is very expensive. So the VERT fund is one of our internal services fund. We also have the restricted revenue fund, was created in 2010. It is used for the purpose of targeted purchases that the council would like to see in the future and holding funds within it to make those purchases at a future date and restricting them from any other purpose. During the fiscal year 2014, one of the items as an example for that was the council reserved in the fund $483,000 out of the general fund for the pavement management system. You'll remember Mr. Krass presented the wheel to you all with the ratings, and we wanted to move, while we always know that you're going to have those in the middle area, and that's what you're trying to get to. We wanted those one-time hits to kind of be able to pull and keep anything from falling into the poor category if at all possible. So for 2018, 2019, calls for $150,000 in 2018, and in fiscal year 2019, that program will close out and be revisited again. The amount in that year is $33,000. And the reason in that year it is $33,000 is the sidewalk program is set to come off of the budget in 2019, and that 117 will be recommended by staff to still go to the road program, so it maintains at the level 150,000 through the period. That concludes the presentation of the operating expenditures of the budget. Just a real quick summary. General fund expenditures for 2018 are currently proposed to the City Council, $9,738,994. Parks and Recreation, $1,396,199, and Enterprise/Business Fund, $6,971,603. Total combined operating expenditures of $18,106,796. For those of you, as a comparison point, for those of you who heard the city manager from Peculiar last Wednesday night speaking to everyone in the room about what he was going to be proposing to his council at a later date, I believe their total expenditures within their budget were about $8 million. But you could, it's in that range someplace. You could ask any of the strangers who were in the room besides his council members. They might remember better than I what his proposed budget is going to be. So that kind of gives you a comparison to another Cass County city of where our budget is at. We're growing, and we're growing very, very fast, and we're seeing it in our budget. Any general questions relative to the operating funds?
I have a question, Jim. I haven't had an opportunity to really look in depth at the parks budget here, but can you tell me if anything in there is inclusive of the cemetery?
Not at this time, sir. We would be bringing a budget amendment to you relative to the cemetery. We don't see a whole lot of costs. What I would see is once we know, and as a matter of fact, Mr. Zur told me today that he has completed that project, that it's in the next interview stage for these. So he's done the background work. The two areas where I would see bringing an amendment, and that would actually be in this year. Okay. Bringing an amendment to the city council would be the possible time associated with the cemetery sextant, which would be minimal. Some of the concern I have with that is, would the council after 12 months decide that they didn't want to do it? It's always painful to have to take money away from somebody once you've started paying them. And especially if you're giving them a title or God forbid, creating a position that might get eliminated in 12 months. So I'd want to let the cemetery stew cook for a little bit in actual reality of existence to make any kind of recommendation to the council on personnel. The one that would hit immediately is we would have to contract with somebody for the maintenance. But those are really, I mean, you know, showing it and keeping it maintained is really all that we have to be considering, and the departments have stepped forward and said, we'll pick this up. It's not like there would be a cemetery department
Okay.
that you would see, like Centerview.
All right. Anything else?
That's it for the operating funds. If the council would like, I can push on with the capital funds, or if you'd like to, I'll try to keep the capital funds much quicker, I promise.
Go ahead.
Push on. And again, I always feel like I have to say these words. The proposed capital budget for fiscal year 2018 and the 5-year capital improvement program are hereby transmitted for council consideration at this time. As I had stated earlier, the capital budget for 2018, for fiscal year 2018 is, and we were on page 251, or the capital budget for 2018 is actually the first year of the 5-year CIP. Specifically, it is the items that are perennially funded in the CIP that we know we are going to have year after year after year. The 3 primary items within that are the street preservation program, which is in the funded category for every year, including the out years, the sidewalk program, and the curb replacement program. The other item that is perennially funded out of a different fund for us is the, in the stormwater program, we do I&I, which has proved to be a highly successful program for us. And the council will remember that a couple of years ago, I asked that the council consider the fact that curbs are also a stormwater conveyance measure. And so in addition to funding curbs out of transportation, we also fund those perennially now out of the stormwater fund. The total amount of projects being proposed in the 2018 capital budget is $3,770,538. Buildings and Grounds has quite a number this year as we see our buildings age or recognize significant problems associated with those that exist, or the city manager is recommending that we don't throw any more good money after bad and do a different type of project. Parks, again, significant projects, $1,044,000. Sanitary sewer, $341,750. Stormwater, $275,465. Transportation, $1,485,000, and water, $150,000. To add up to that $3,700,000. With the council's indulgence, the way I would like to proceed, we could just go to page 257 and run down this list real quickly, but it doesn't follow the categories, but it does follow the funds by which they're being paid for out of. If we could just work our way through each of the capital funds that are associated with it, and that way Mr. Icky and Ms. Watson's work on putting pictures in and explanations won't go unnoticed, which would take us to the the Building and Equipment Replacement Fund on page 263 of your budget as the first fund. There are 6 projects being proposed for the 2018 budget. City Hall LED lights and Public Works LED lights are the first 2 on the list. This program has been highly successful here at City Hall to the extent that we have done it so far. We believe that there will be a payback, albeit a longer payback. The amount that is listed as far as annual savings with these two amounts of $13,250 and $15,500 is $500, but another significant cost savings associated with this is the LED lights last forever. And so there is the savings in maintenance to install them, and there is the savings in not having to replace them. The third public project being proposed out of this particular fund is the Public Works Facility roof repair. This particular item falls under the heading of members of the council and Mr. Mayor, we just have to stop throwing good money after bad. We've tried every single simple fix and piece of advice that we have, and the building continues to leak. It is time to address the known problem and get this roof fixed once and for all. Estimated and proposed budget cost for this $202,500. Executive conference room chairs. You all probably don't notice as much. You'll all remember that the mayor several months ago sat down in his chair and disappeared behind the dais. This happens on a regular basis with a number of the chairs in the executive conference room. I kind of like going in for management team when we all sit down at the same time to see who will be the unfavored few who just sink and we never hear from them again. So $6,000 for that project. City Hall front entry repair, this is another one of those where we have tried every fix in the world. A component of this is we get and still have a significant leak underneath that front slab, which unfortunately is our evidence room. And water and evidence, bad. So we are proposing to add on to the previous amount for a total project of $242. The current plan, so the council is aware, is to make the front patio not exist anymore. The front patio, these doors will be blown out. The front patio will become the entrance to the lobby. We will expand the lobby, maybe have a nice sitting area, do a better job on our ADA compliance out there as it exists right now. We're going to have someone sitting out there full time, and with a single set of doors that are done correctly, we get beyond the evidence room and we have it covered. We put down a new flooring and we fix this problem once and for all, and also fix the fact that the lobby is usually about 20 degrees colder than it is outside on any given date, just because of the wind during the winter, because of the wind blowing through there right on top of everything that goes on. So be moving it out a ways and covering it. The City Hall lobby modifications would be done in conjunction with this. This is part of the lobby committee and the management team's efforts to improve our customer service overall, along with having somebody, a receptionist greeter sitting out there. We want to get rid of the last of the windows and modify the desks or the countertops that are out here. The windows just simply don't work. They were put in, they are bulletproof glass. If you want to avoid the bulletproof glass and you have a gun, just step to the side of the bulletproof glass because it's just 2 sheets of drywall there. It was a bad application to begin with. You can't hear. The speakers have only made it worse because they work intermittently, and when they are working, a private transaction can be heard all the way across the building into the engineering department. So we'd like to, in addition to the front entry repair, in conjunction with that, get the lobby modified for customer service. Police squad room renovation at $55,000. The squad room is really the last area downstairs that has not been looked at. The unique thing about our police department is it is the only part of the building that is 24/7. And the squad room gets used all day and all night. It has been used all day and all night since this building was built. It's It's worn out and there's better ways to do things. Chief did an extensive amount of research on modifications that could be done to improve access, to improve the units that are actually being used that are in there, to lend what privacy can be lent to the officers who are writing reports when the need arises. And we've had some very, very good, very, very free expert advice into what could go into this particular location. So we want to take advantage of it. Really hope you'll consider that $55,000. That is the Building and Equipment Replacement Fund. Park Fee and Lieu Fund has no proposed expenditures out of it. That takes us to the Transportation Fund on page 275. Again, the three perennial projects, the curb replacement program for $400,000 out of this fund, the street preservation program, $800,000 out of this fund, and the sidewalk program for $117,000 out of this particular fund. There are three other projects being proposed out to be paid for out of this particular fund. The Hubach Hill Streetlight Program, the intersection of Hubach Hill and Jay and then going east is one of the darkest areas of the city. It does call for a couple of streetlights to be put in between that intersection on that side, the east side of the intersection, and going up to Florence to light that particular area. The Johnson Drive street light, this is where Johnson Drive and Fox Ridge intersect, and it's the odd intersection where Johnson Drive doesn't match up. You take the jog. Because of that, there never were street lights put in there. Again, a very, very dark location in the city that needs street lights. The roundabout, you've all heard, I am sure, from various sources that that the roundabout needs better lighting. This calls for, I believe, 3 street lights, Mike? 2 street lights to be installed at the circle. And those are the projects within the Transportation Fund. Any questions about the Transportation Fund itself? Terrific. The Transportation Geo Bond Fund, which is a sub-fund, even though these had previously been budgeted, we're obviously going to be getting to the projects themselves in the 2018 year. We'll be getting to them a little bit sooner, actually, but because they'll be going hot and heavy in 2018, Ms. Watson thought, and I concurred, that it would be a good idea to include these for you to take a look at. Fox Ridge Drive Extension. Fox Ridge Drive Extension is going to be being done by the developer. And you all, hopefully, next Monday night, if not next Monday night, I can guarantee by the council meeting following that, we'll be seeing the reimbursement agreement to the developer. Developer can realize cost savings that the city can't. The delay in this has actually only been that the developer bid it out and is not used to having to bid out a prevailing wage job. And while Mr. Zur was pretty willing to let that slide, I insisted that the job be rebid out by the developer as a prevailing wage job so we can spend all that extra money. As you can tell, roles reversed. Mr. Zur strongly encouraged us that because public dollars are being used, and even in light of the fact that prevailing wage is more than likely going to go away next year, at least in its existing form, we need to move forward on this project. So we came to a final agreement. Beauty of it was that the contractor came to us, and this actually applies to a number of our projects. Contractor went to Dave Otis and said, in the interim 3-month period, construction prices have actually gone down. And one of the advantages that they can do when you're a private developer is you can take the new prices and that's okay. So we actually realized the reduction, renegotiated that. There were some items that Mr. Crass felt the developer should be paying for that didn't really apply to the road. If we were out there doing the road ourselves, we wouldn't be doing that. They were more development related. So in very short order, in the next couple of months, you will see dirt turning on Fox Ridge Drive. The Johnson Drive project, we will begin turning dirt on November 1. November 1 marks the beginning of winter for construction contractors. It also marks the beginning of winter for the Department of Natural Resources, and that means that when we start turning dirt on November 1, as opposed to turning dirt on October 31st, we don't have to spend many thousands of dollars on a bat survey, which is literally for bats. If you're cutting down the number of trees that we're cutting down for this particular project, you have to spend about $5,000 or more to survey all of the trees to make sure there's not bats in them during the summer. If you're doing the work during the winter, you're free of the bat survey. So Mr. Crass made the strong recommendation that we wait until November 1 to start turning dirt. I applaud him for that. Yes?
You brought up a pretty good point. You're talking about the 3 GEO bond projects, which, you know, we came up with an estimate of what we thought that was going to cost and sold the bonds and raised the money. What does the law say we have to do with that money? If you've talked about the potential of cost savings on a couple of these projects, we have money left over. What are we required to do with that, if anything?
2 things. You can either take the money and put it into making your debt service payment, or because the bond issue language is broad enough, if there is another legitimate project that falls within the category of the bond issue language, you can take on that project. A couple of years ago, we saved or during the last bond issue, the 2007 bond issue, we saved a significant amount of money because we could not do something. We could not do the north part of the North Madison project, and so that money was diverted to a project that was not on the original list but met the criteria. Kentucky Road relocation, we have just received this past week the appraisal for the Dean property that will be necessary to make the right-of-way acquisition for this particular road. With that in hand, we are scheduled for a meeting with Belton because we have to connect into their portion of Old Kentucky. Mr. Crass is scheduled to meet with their city council in work session on Tuesday night, September 5th, while we are meeting here. That concludes the transportation GEO bond projects. Excise tax fund projects begin on page 289. 155th Street reconstruction will begin in this year, but we have it down on here because it will be continuing as a winter project well into the fiscal year 2018 year. So we kept it on here the same way we kept the GEO bond projects on. The council several years ago did approve amounts to come out of the excise tax fund. Prior to that, we had only used it to build new roads, specifically one new road. We had used it to build Dean Avenue, no other new roads. But the ballot language for this actually called for the excise tax funds that are raised to be able to be used for maintenance of existing thoroughfare, higher volume roads within the city for the same reason. Additional building of infrastructure makes more use on those roads. So in the 2018 budget, we have $125,000 budgeted primarily for microsurfacing of those portions of Lucy Webb that have not been done yet and Dean Avenue. Any questions on the excise tax fund? Just one final note before we leave it. You will note from the fund page on page 291 that the excise tax fund begins to grow a fairly healthy balance. While Kansas City has capped their amount at $700,000 that they'll reimburse us up to on the improvement to 155th Street and the bridge, I've asked Mike to look at the possibility of, within the limits of the right-of-way that we have available, any enhancements that could be done to that project. Kind of like to fire a little bit of a shot across the bow to the council that's a big deal for us, that road. And we want to make Jackson County proud. Yeah. So if we could do any enhancements, I might be coming back to the council asking for perhaps a little bit more city contribution than the $700,000. We'll never be able to do curb and gutter, but if there's real problem areas on it, or we could maybe put something else up there to enhance that road, I've asked Mike to keep an open mind, and for all the contractors to keep an open mind on that. Pre-bid is next week, Mike? Tomorrow. So we're moving ahead. The Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund, this year in the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund, which begins on page 295, is what Mr. Icky would refer to as a normalization year. It has been, we have used the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund to the greatest degree possible within my comfort level over the past several years. I would like to give it a year to rebuild a little bit and get healthy. We are still proposing 2 projects out of it. $15,000 to be added to the $88,000 from prior year, from last year, current year that we're in, for a total project of $103,000 for street light installation. Moving forward, the Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund will be used year after year. We will be budgeting $15,000 to it for when we get a call for street light installation someplace. The $88,000 that you see as the starter was, you'll remember when we approached you last year on that amount, there were 4 neighborhoods that got caught in between KCP&L not putting them in and us buying. So we have an obligation to go back to those 4 neighborhoods and get those street lights put in. We have already received a request this year out of the $15,000. Probably won't come as a surprise to very many of you. It's for Franklin Street. We think we have a good source identified who can help us. We've taken a couple of passes at Franklin Street, and all of the residents have signed the petition to have a street light or street lights put in. Unfortunately, we couldn't get any of the residents over the hump of actually having it in their front yard. So we think we have a source now. So we're going to go hot and heavy on the Franklin Street light out of this year's $15,000 in that regard. That is the Capital Improvement Fund project. Stormwater sales tax. Have a couple of neat projects out of this one. Of course, the supplement to the $400,000 in the transportation fund for the annual curb replacement fund at $100,000. And then a really neat project. Can't tell the council how well received the permeable pavers have been on Huntsman. And so, especially as an identifier, but they really help, and we didn't get it but a couple of chances last winter. I hope we don't get any more this winter, but if we do, they do a really good job of transferring that water out so it doesn't turn to ice in the intersections. So we're going to begin to propose a multi-year project, with this year being $114,465, to begin installing those down 58 Highway. we'll do one side, then we would do the other side, and then if necessary, or we can and we think it's advisable, we would advise within 58 Highway going down so that whole intersections would be identified by permeable pavers and a paver system. A little bit of a rustic look, but it's definitely something that nobody else has. We thought it would be good both from an ecological standpoint, from a DNR standpoint, from a driver safety standpoint during the winter with the ice, and just from an overall identifier look.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just kind of curious, and I know the cost will change as time goes on. What did that cost us to do the one at Huntsman? And then also, how many different intersections are we talking about? Because I'm not really sure how many we have along 58 that.
It will be a multifaceted project, many, many years to get the entire thing done, but a pretty good strike here. We're looking for, with this one, the south side of 58 Highway all the way from Skyline to North High Drive. So considerable. How many intersections do you think that is, Mr. Krass? Thank you. The cost for the one at Huntsman is, we can get that for you, but we're going to have to pull it out. You'll remember Huntsman was a much more extensive project. We had to do a little bit of street work. We had to do the median. We had to do the plantings in the median. So, but we'll get that number for you.
Well, I'm just kind of curious because I see this here, since the sidewalk program is coming to its life cycles in, I can see this here taking that over, and quite frankly, you know, just on the surface, I would be interested in even thinking about, you say multi-year, you know, that kind of bothers me, but I'd like to see a less of a multi-year, but I'd like to see something aggressive.
The next item is, again, one of those, you open up the budget book right after and you note something that has to be corrected. The North Washington Street culvert replacement, this has been needed for quite some time. The corrugated metal pipe culvert has exceeded its service life, and just like in Silver Lake, we begin to see the ground above them starting to fall. You'll see the pictures for the North Madison Street culvert, so that in the final budget won't be there. It'll be North Washington Street. Oops. And then the last item is the storm culvert replacement between Rainbow Circle and Silver Lake Circle. Again, those backyards that are there, you can visibly see where that has started to deteriorate because that culvert is giving out. She's my name, sir. The Park Sales Tax Fund. Some very exciting projects in this particular fund for this year. The Park Board recognizes the value of small victories in this day and age, and so we see a dramatic increase in the number of those smaller projects that they begin to bring to the City Council. The pedestrian bridge at Recreation Park that connects the Moon Valley Park with the larger Recreation Park, it has deteriorated to a point where it's becoming a safety issue. So the first project at $55,000 being proposed for here is to replace that particular pedestrian bridge. Second one's very interesting. Recreation Park Picnic Pavilion. Tear down the park house and you have a big empty spot there. At approximately that location for $210,000. Build a new pavilion. This would mirror what you see in Moon Valley Park as far as size and amenities that are available there. Recreation Park Pond, if you've seen it, is in desperate need of a rehab. If we could probably start taking donations at this point against the $10,000 from all of the disc golf players who have lost their discs to the bottom of that particular pond and can't get them back because they can't get through the algae that's on the top of it, and we would more than make this up, I'm sure. In any event, it does need to be done. $10,000 pays for the beginning part of this, the study associated with what has to be done. Concession stand internet connectivity with Wi-Fi, total amount of $33,500. You are not deceived. This is the second year we're bringing this to you. We found out that the $18,000 that was budgeted in the prior year, the current year, wasn't going to be enough. Specifically associated with that is the fact that you got, even though it's Wi-Fi from there out, you got to get something to it to make it Wi-Fi, and we underestimated and were shocked by the cost associated with coming all the way from Madison to get the infrastructure necessary to get that park Wi-Fi'd. So we're asking for an additional amount to be added to what is already there to get to the $33,500 to actually get Wi-Fi in. Recreation park pedestrian safety enhancements. This will go very, very nicely, staff feels, with the rack coming online. It will provide walking interconnectivity. You can kind of see it in the picture, the red lines. Off of the main parking lot, there will be 3 areas to get to a trail that gets you to the ball fields and then gets you up to cross to a simple street crossing to actually get to the rack from that parking lot, so it interconnects the 2 parking lots themselves. The final one is a request from one of our park board members, a strenuous request from one of our park board members to get hot air dryers into our, which has been duplicated by one of our council members, to get hot air dryers for drying hands from a sanitary standpoint into those park restrooms. That includes park sales tax funds. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I realize it's just a picture and it's down in the weeds, but the pedestrian bridge replacement shows a picture of a wooden bridge. Anybody that's ever had a wooden deck on the back of their house knows after about the second year, you're going to spend every single year staining, sanding, replacing warp boards. I just didn't know if this is just for illustration purposes or if we had considered composite lumber, which has a certainly much greater extended lifespan than standard wood, a little bit more in cost, generally speaking, but will last us a lot longer without having to replace it.
Illustration purposes only, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just noticed, or I noticed this, I hadn't noticed it before, and maybe it was here and I didn't see it. With the Wi-Fi, I like that it also says that it's necessary for installing park security cameras, and I don't know that was something that was discussed a year ago, but if it was, I forgot about it, but that's great. I mean, that's something extra to say, hey, it's not just for doing this, but it's improving safety, so that's good.
Thank you, sir. Parks Geo Bond Fund. Again, these have been prior approved, but and all of them are pretty much carryover with the exception of TB Hanna, but worth revisiting just very quickly. Of course, the rack, $2,952,573. The additional signage for Hawk Ridge Park, the Hawk Ridge Park improvements themselves, the Hawk Ridge Park parking and ADA playground, and the TB Hanna Station Park improvements for restrooms. Any questions on any of those? We've been through them pretty much. They've been vetted.
When do we start the water fountain thing? Ice skating rink.
Well, we
Spray
just,
park.
we just now interviewed design firms for TB Hanna. So TB Hanna is actually the very last project that is called for in the bond issue. It was the last one called for, even in the brochures, et cetera. So we're a ways off on TB Hanna.
Okay,
Splash Park.
splash park, yeah. That's what Holton said.
Ding. Water connection fee fund, there are currently no projects budgeted for the fiscal year 2018. The sewer connection fee fund, there is a project proposed, page 323. I'm going to be requesting of staff that we may want to consider changing the picture out, because we're actually proposing lift station emergency generators and not a missile silo. The
Aren't they synonymous?
I just kept staring at that, wondering. I think it's all to scale. It's much smaller than maybe it looks on. The lift station emergency generators are being proposed for for two of our smaller lift stations that we have taken over at Hunters Glen and Morning View. You can see on here the amounts that are associated just with providing the emergency generator. The lift stations are in good operating order and meet all of Mr. Crass's standards, but we do need to get the emergency generators onto those in accordance with DNR standards and requirements. That cost is $94,500.
I have a question. You just brought up not a concern, but an interest. Are we taking over the lift station at Morning View? Is that what you're saying? Or have we?
We already have, sir. We've had it for some time.
When did we do that?
Yep.
It was part of the original infrastructure, same way we take over sewer and water and streets.
You may be thinking about a different lift station.
I think
sir.
I am, and then I'll address that later. So I appreciate the opportunity for the question. Thank you.
The Enterprise Capital Maintenance Fund, again, the perennial projects now, the inflow and infiltration at $123,000 for the budget. Census meter system, $150,000 to supplement the $88,200. The $88,200 gets us 300 meters. This 150 boosts that to by about 500 additional iPearl meters to give us a really good jump start into that program. The Owen Good Force Main condition analysis picture kind of says it all where we're going to be working this. We originally went from the Owen Good lift station from the lift station itself to a discharge point at Sunset and 58 Highway right down here by Mazuma. Now it's time to go north and complete that condition analysis. The pipe itself, as the city council is aware, is experiencing significant deterioration. We had the very expensive emergency project down on Mr. Good's property a couple of years ago. We live in an area that has extremely acidic soil. This pipe is reaching the end of its useful life, but we can't just, it would be far too expensive to just go in there and start ripping and digging and replacing. First, we need to get the study done. I know the study seems expensive on the face of it, but it will pay for itself in not having to dig up sections of pipe in the future. Owen Good overflow valve replacement. The current valve is about 25 years old. It's the big valve. It's the valve that we need to send stuff that from where we don't want it to where we do want it. Pretty important valve pretty expensive valve, but pretty important valve in the grand scheme of things. So we would also be proposing that at $30,000 in the fiscal year 2018 budget. That concludes the presentation of the capital funds, Your Honor.
Mike, you probably know, but with regard to that valve, is there any kind of, I don't know, a group bid where you can get, because we're buying so much at Little Blue Valley Sewer District these days on our upgrades there, are there interchangeable valves and things that we can get their pricings from?
We will take a look at that. It's, our purchasing specialist looks at a number of cooperative bid opportunities every time we
Okay.
make a significant
All right, thanks.
purchase.
Mr. Keller.
I think that's an excellent idea. I remember an opportunity we had to buy furniture that we had contact with the former school district that saved us a significant amount of money, so I think that's an excellent idea. Might be something there.
What you got next?
That concludes staff report this evening, sir.
No way. Well, thank you. It's a lot to soak in right now. I know for our new members on the council, and I'm fairly new at this myself, at this side of the table. I know that what we like to do is take Mr. Fearborn's report, absorb it. Of course, the biggest thing that we heard tonight was we have about 1.3 million in unrestricted fund balance for purposes of things like Mr. Kellogg suggested, that potentially those intersection projects could be boosted, the timeline for it. Just one consideration as an example. But Mr. Moorhead.
I just wanted to commend Mr. Fearborn, Ms. Watson, the rest of staff to put this together. I mean, yes, this was a lot to take in, those of us that have sat through a few of these. It's still impressive every time you do it and see it. You know, to kind of jump in, Mr. Mayor, on what you were just about to say about the undesignated fund balance, I would really encourage everybody. I know that some various projects have, you know, people bring to mind. We talk about the next couple weeks and months. I would strongly recommend, though, that keep in mind this staff has cut themselves to the quick, so we have the ability to have 1.2 million. I do believe that Mr. Fearborn mentioned some expansion items of approximately $77,000 that were not included in the budget. And when I'm hearing staff is not getting training of like $1,500, but we get to play with $1.2 million, it would seem kind of insulting to staff if we were at least not considerate of including those items in the budget when we're talking about our additions too. I mean, like I said, they run with a pretty tight belt, and this is just incredible, and I think we should give a little respect back by honoring and respecting what they've done.
Well, and to conclude, thank you for finishing my thought for me there. Go ahead, Mr. Holman.
I just wanted to say I wanted to commend Mr. Fearborn and the entire staff on this particular budget. Every year that I've been here, it's been an incredible process. I've always been very comfortable coming into the budget, especially with the staff and Mr. Fearborn's background and years of managing this. But I think this year's budget has a different feel to it. There's a different tone in many of the things that Mr. Fearborn said. Strong input from staff, the idea of them doing a lot of what we have paid consultants to do in the past. I was magnanimously impressed when Mr. Krass took over the TB Hanna Station project. When Mr. Kennedy was here, took that out of the hands of a consultant. We got a much better project. I don't think that project would even have been on our GO bond radar had Mr. Krass not taken that over. So these are the people that live and work in this area. A consultant can come in and give us what the latest trends are in the industry, but these people know what our citizens want. I think that's a fantastic idea. I love the idea of the permeable pavers. We go way beyond basic services, just taking care of our streets and our pipes, our water, our sewer, our police protection. This is great stuff. The project that Chief Zimmerman came up with to renovate the squad room. The squad room is one that there's probably 3 people in this room know. The only thing that gets used more than that is the police car. You start your shift there, you end your shift there, and depending upon the call load you have, you may be in there 2 or 3 times to bring evidence or other things in. Imagine a college dorm room with 8 sets of people cycling through it, because that's what that room is like. It's one that the civilians rarely see, but it's probably one of the most used pieces of infrastructure that the police ever use. This is excellent top to bottom, in my opinion, from what we've seen from the introduction, sir. I commend all of staff across the board for this. This is excellent work.
Mr. Kellogg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to commend staff myself also. The level of detail that went into this that Mr. Feuerborn did speak about, and the nuances that are involved in many of it, just by placing a start project on one date opposed to another. It's that type of detail that I recognize that drives what we are. The devil's is in the details, and there's so many little ones in there that they add up, and it is definitely tangible. So I appreciate that level of commitment from you, Jim, and your entire staff. I know that you can't do it without those folks. You demand of them that type of expectations, and they meet it. And it is definitely seen. I can only speak for myself, but I think, the feeling I get from my colleagues matches the same thing. It is recognized, and hats off to all of you. Thank you for everything you've done, everybody. So I appreciate it, and thanks.
Anybody have anything? Mr. Barber.
I'll just continue this. I've been impressed every year looking at the budget, and I was on vacation, so didn't get a ton of time to pour through it, but it's very detailed and very impressive. I'm really impressed with staff convincing Mr. Feuerborn to allow that we're going to build 175 homes next year. I mean, that shows a great degree in what staff is tenderizing Mr. Feuerborn a little bit. Maybe some days we can recognize a business that's all but opened their doors and get to budget for future revenue there. But we'll take one step at a time, and it's a little, it's always give and take. But great job. I know Mr. Feuerborn takes this very, very seriously. It is the single most important thing that we do. We take it very seriously. The people of Raymore obviously take it very seriously, or they wouldn't put us in this position. But great job, and thanks again for a fantastic budget.
Mr. Berenson.
I'll go ahead and speak since everybody else is too. I spent a lot of time reading military publications, and so when I get this big folder, I was expecting some pretty dry reading. Being new on the council, I also want to commend you. It was easy to follow. I spent 3 or 4 hours in this, and I didn't think I would, but I went almost cover to cover with it, and you did a very good job, especially for somebody who's a little bit new at this and a little less experience than the rest of the council. It was very easy to go through and very easy to follow, and I thank you and the city staff.
Anybody else? Mr. Townsend.
Yes, I believe I'm obligated and obliged to speak as well. Yes, as Mr. John has said, I don't want to mess up his last name because I do that sometimes. Outstanding work, as I've said on many council sessions. Staff is very professional, and this is representative of that work. As Mr. Moorhead has said, we have some professionals within our city. Staff and city has definitely shown the professionalism in this and the ability to have $1.2 million for us to figure out how to support you and to do more. In my position, in my civilian job, we're doing more with less, but you seem to be doing even more and being good stewards of the people's money, and coming up with ways to do that. So now it's our role to try to figure out a way to help you continue that great effort, is with the training opportunities, to give you those more skills to do even better year over year. And I applaud you for that, and I appreciate that. Because again, it just makes this job that much more easier because of the hard work that you put into it. So again, good work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I would echo what Mr. Moorhead said about the expansion items not included. You know, for it to be a little over $90,000, and we're looking at 1.29, or yeah, 1.29 million. It's hard to even fathom that much money set aside as an unrestricted fund balance. It does seem like trying to meet many of those requests would be, of course, I know you explained through there were other areas that you were seeking opportunities to purchase those items out of that you could fit in there, but it would seem pretty easy if the board would just say include those in the item, if the council would do that. Sorry, not a board. It's my historical past coming back to bite me there. Anyway, I don't see us having anything else for this evening, do you?
No, sir. Just want to let you all know I am available at your convenience. If you have questions, concerns, thoughts that you want to bounce off, data that you would like us to procure, like the water sewer rate data, we will be working on those things starting tomorrow. And we have, again, as I said at the beginning, we have 2 months. That 2 months will go by very fast, but every work session meeting that we have between now and the reading of the final budget, even through October, there will be a line item on for discussion of the budget.
All right. Well, thank you. Do we have any reason to go to? No reason? We're done. Thank you.